It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher.
I think our track record in the last 20 years, how many NFC East titles, playoff appearances, and appearances in the NFC Championship game, those are some of the metrics I look at, and I'll compare our record with almost anybody.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which dropped this morning. A new edition is out with Geoff Mosher and Adam Kaplan. And it is brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bets and take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com. Download the PropSwap app today. Geoff Mosher is back. Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. All right, we are getting eerily close to the NFL draft, and I am excited. I'm also sad. As much as I've talked about the draft, and you're like, man, I want this draft to get here, I also don't want it to go away, Mosh, because then we'll be like devoid of football conversation for a while here. So it's like it's like a sad, anticlimactic feeling when the draft actually gets here.
I don't know. I mean, I can't remember a time where Eagles football was devoid of something juicy to talk about. I mean, last year you had the draft, and then after the draft for a good 2 or 3 weeks, there was a lot of Jalen Hurts debate talk and things like that. You never know what's going to happen.
All right, so what's
picking really high?
So what's the pick that would make people have 2 weeks worth of pulling their hair out? What happened? Who's the guy they take at 12 that you're like, what?
Well, I think you've got a lot. First of all, for shock value, Trey Lance at 12, right? Because no one thinks they're taking a quarterback now.
From North Dakota, from all places.
Exactly. Even more than Justin Fields or Mac Jones, I think Trey Lance at 12 or trading anything would bring a lot of conversation. I think for the sake of argument, I mean, Micah Parsons would probably be considered a good pick, but it would be so shocking if the Eagles actually took a linebacker that high in the first round that it would open up all sorts of discussions. Is this a new regime, a new wave of thinking? How much did Jonathan Gannon have say in that kind of a pick like that? But I don't think that'll happen, but certainly that would add to it.
Now, Sal Pal said on Friday, I asked him if he thought that Gannon and Sirianni would have input on the draft, and he thought that they both would because Gannon's defense covered 2. You need different personnel.
Yeah, I think all the time coaches, Mike, have input. I mean, they're asked to evaluate players. They're asked to kind of provide, in many cases, you'll have coaches who provide certain kind of parameters for a player as far as measurements and metrics and things like that. Chip Kelly was big into that. Doug Peterson even had a few position-specific physical criteria he liked. So coaches always have input, as far as making the pick or not making the pick. That's a different story. And of course, how much say a head coach has in an overall pick kind of depends on the success of that head coach and the time spent. So I imagine that guys like Gannon and Sirianni will have some input, but they will not be making the pick.
Right. And I didn't think that they were going to have that much power, but just the input to say, look, I'm running cover 2. I need a 6'1", 210-pound corner, and might be advantageous to get that guy at number 12.
Yeah, you can probably try to impress yourself that way. I was told something though a while back that this coaching staff so far has not put a lot of emphasis or priority on physical. Like you're right, a lot of times when teams run a cover 2 defense, they do want the taller physical corner. Some teams like running backs that are smaller and shiftier. Others like big and strong. Middle linebacker for some teams is different than others. But I was told that there has been, this coaching staff has basically said, get us very good players. We'll figure out a way to scheme them, which is what you want coaches to do and say. So that's a good development there.
Right. Now, couple things on the draft that I want to get your opinion on. All right, let's say, okay, this is what I'm going to miss about the draft, because I could have these conversations, you know what I mean, I can argue back and forth for 2 hours on the same thing and not get tired of it, but I could ask you, let's say Weddle, Smith, one of those wide receivers is on the board at 12, or Horn, a corner, is on the board at 12. who do you think is higher on their draft? Who do you think is rated as their best available player? One of those receivers or one of those corners?
Yeah, that's a great question. Wish I had the answer to that. I'll try to get it closer to the draft. I would think that they're all going to be in kind of a similar cluster of rating numerically, that it's not going to be like.
So how does that go, Moshe? Is there like year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, or is it you guys are tier 1, you guys are tier 2, you guys are tier 3, etc.?
Yeah, a little bit of both, right? You have a numerical rating that they go by that a lot of teams use, but also just because, you may have player ranked okay, so let's say you have the 12th best player on your board, okay, by a numerical ranking. It doesn't mean that when he's gone, your 13th best player is the guy you pick at the same spot, because you may feel that there is a divide between your 12th best player and 13th best. This is all hypothetical. 13th best player. That is the difference. The divide is big enough per round. So you might say, all right, these are my first rounders. Okay. It ends here. This next guy, yeah, he's 13th. That other guy is 12th, but they're not in the same realm. So this is where our second round talent begins, right? And then so on for third, fourth, and fifth. And then you kind of identify the clusters. So like, for example, a long time, I think Daniel Jeremiah last year had Jalen Hurts ranked as his 50th overall prospect, 50th best prospect, which would tell you that I think some people looked at it and then said, well, that's naturally then a second rounder, 32 teams, 64, but that's not necessarily the case if you don't believe that there are 49 first and second round players, available players. You're just literally ranking the player by value 1 to whatever. Round specifics are different.
Okay. Same question. What if I threw an offensive lineman in the mix? Would they take an offensive lineman as best player available if it was Rashawn Slater against J.C. Horn?
I hope so. I really do. I hope so. You can never tell. Look, I don't want to, we've talked about this already, and obviously there was a piece today in The Athletic that kind of outlined a lot of the things that we've discussed about with this front office. The one thing I've always said is I wish for the Eagles to function as one team, one front office, harmony, everybody on the same page. And I don't always get the vibe, the feeling, the sense that they always do. So I'd love to sit here and say, yes, they should just go ahead with their best player on their board. But what board are they picking from? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So.
And we have people who are on the stream right now. They want you to talk about the article, which we can kind of get into. But I tweeted this out a little while ago. I read that article. I'm not saying it's not new news. We know that there's a friction, there's a separation. But this is my take on it, Moshe, and see what you think. Mm-hmm. It seems that in all sports right now, not just the Eagles and not just the NFL, that many teams and these leagues are fighting between analytics and enter sport here guys. Football guy, baseball guy, etc. There isn't a balance. They have troubles respecting each other's views, and that causes chaos. The teams that have figured out a way to either coexist or just pick one, like we're an analytical team, we're getting rid of baseball scouts. Their opinions are out because it seems that there is such a divide between the analytics department and the old school scouts in all sports, and they don't respect each other's opinions, and therefore you have what the Eagles have going on right now. And this isn't Singletary. This isn't, just the Eagles who have this problem. A lot of teams have this where the analytics side doesn't respect their opinions, and then the other side doesn't respect the analytics opinions, and you have a friction.
It's a difficult marriage. It's an uneasy marriage because you have two groups of people that don't necessarily come up through the respective sport in the same way and don't necessarily view it the same way. And sometimes one side's right, sometimes the other side's right. It's hard to get them to meet in the middle because they're literally looking at the same thing through a different lens. And there are so many examples of guys who buck the trend that don't necessarily make a good argument for the long haul. Like you don't go drafting franchise quarterbacks in the 6th round, right? Because Tom Brady made it. How many times you hear people say that? No, that's a bad example. That's an outlier, right? So, but there's enough outliers and examples from the football people only side and the analytics people only side that it is a very difficult marriage. I agree with you that it's not just, it's pervasive. It's not just with the Eagles. I think that there are teams that are trying harder to find a good balance and find the right people, the bridge people, the communicators, to bring them together. But I would say as a society also, Mike, we are not we don't judge it fairly as well. I mean, go back to the World Series, right? The Tampa Bay Rays manager, Kevin Cash, he did, by pulling Blake Snell in the 6th inning there, he did every single thing he's done since day one of last year to get that team into the World Series. And he pulls Blake Snell, they lose, he gets killed by it. And whether you thought it was right or wrong, but when people look at that situation, they say, well, you got to manage game 6 of the World Series differently than game 7 of the regular season. And what Kevin Cash would say is, no, I have a formula. I have a formula that is supposed to, for me and my team and the way we're built and constructed, that's how we're going to win from day one till the last day of the year. I'm not going to change that formula to adapt to a different scenario. Is he right or is he wrong? I don't know.
Right.
In that one single instance, it looked wrong. But over the long haul, it may have been the correct move because he did the same thing in game 2 and they won that game. A lot of people forget. So I don't even know that everybody understands how to balance analytics and quote unquote gut the right way.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm not saying that there is a right way, but I'm saying until, now I would ask you, I've never heard of Alex Halaby before. Have you heard that name
Yes.
before? Okay.
So, I know Alec Halaby. I know he's been with the organization for a while. He has a weird kind of role. He was the president of football operations, which was a analytics job. And then if you remember, they hired Andrew Berry a couple of years ago and gave him the exact same title, which was very strange because how do you have one guy then give another guy the same title? And then when Andrew Berry left, he kind of re-got the title. I know that there are people in the building who come from the football side that are skeptical of him and his staff and their significance and their say, and they're skeptical of the relationship that he has with the Lurie's and Howie Roseman and how he's viewed in the building. And that's part of this uneasy marriage that we talk about.
Right. It almost feels like, and I tweeted this out earlier, it feels like he is what Alex Rucker was with the Sixers, where you had this analytical lawyer essentially telling Brett Brown, hey, these are going to be your rotations. At this minute mark of the first quarter, you need to take these guys out of the game. And it's like you have this split between people who have played basketball their whole lives or coached and the way they think, and someone who's going off of this. And until you can get them all on the same page, I feel like you're going to hear these stories a lot. The Sixers just had this story. They got rid of the guy, Rucker. They started over. That doesn't mean that these things aren't going to exist with Daryl Morey because he's a very analytical-driven guy. But it seems like, for now anyway, they have found a balance. The Eagles, it doesn't sound like they have found this balance yet.
Right. And unfortunately, to aid, like, to what you see in the draft. See, Joe Banner has come on Inside the Birds a lot, and Joe Banner really brought, when he and Jeffrey, when Jeffrey bought the team and Joe came along, Joe brought the concept of having an analytics group to the Eagles after Jeffrey bought the team. And Joe had, as he's told us, had a team from MIT come in and do a lot of things analytically as far as, the extra advanced stats on players. But the one thing Joe Banner has said to us repeatedly is that in the NFL, what was commonly known as analytics was never used in drafting. Maybe player evaluation as far as, who's running at what speed during a game. There are a lot of different ways you can use analytics, but Joe said we were never using analytics as a factor into who we were drafting, where, and when. Clearly, that's changed. I remember you asked me maybe when the Jeff McLean article came out a couple of weeks ago in the Inquirer, right, which was similar to today's Athletic piece. Hasn't Jeffrey always been very involved? Is there anything that's changed? And I said, no, there have been some changes with him. Well, that's a big part of it. His reliance now on analytics to the point where he's carried it into the draft and using that to kind of perhaps settle ties. We'll go with the analytics view there. We'll go with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside over at Paris Campbell. That's an example of where something he wasn't doing in the Andy Reid era, along with the I call them the fireside chats on Tuesday with the head coach on every single move that was made and why it was done and not done.
Right. Well, I thought one of the things of that article that today's article from The Athletic, if those of you who haven't seen it, The Athletic had a piece, long form, very long form, by the way. Bo Wolf, Sheil Kapadia, and Zach Berman basically talking about there's a lot of dysfunction in what I see is like this analytics side can't get along with the football guys, which means the football scouts are saying, look, we're scouting, we're giving you information, and you're not using the information. You're using this guy's information. And, these other things, like you talked about the Tuesday chats with Peterson. They won the game against the Packers, but Lurie wanted to know why they didn't throw the ball more. And Peterson's like, we won the game. You want me to throw? Like, what's the difference? Like those kind of things. That's really nitpicky.
Nitpicky from Jeffrey's standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, you win the game. Who cares if you threw it 50 times or ran it 50 times?
Yeah, and it opens up some kind of I think people think, and I'm not sure that they're right about this, I think people think that Nick Sirianni was hired to bring a cult offense, which has run the ball a lot more than teams in the past, teams are traditionally doing now, to the Eagles, which really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense if that's how Jeffrey Lurie feels about running the ball. So it invites that question. What is it that they see in Nick Sirianni, who for the last 3 years as offensive coordinator has leaned pretty heavily on the running game there?
Yeah.
How does that mesh? I think the biggest thing, Mike, I talk to you, I always say this to you, I think, when we talk, especially on draft time, my biggest wish for the Eagles is that they just functioned as one harmonious team where all the departments may have their disagreements, which you're right is pervasive in sports between analytics and scouting and coaching. But at the end of the day, here's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have meetings. You're supposed to have your arguments. Those are healthy, right? Whether it's coaches versus scouting, whether it's scouting versus analytics or coaches versus analytics.
Sure.
And then at the end of the day, after everybody hashes it out, your main guy, your GM, in this case, Howie, sets that board based on all the input, and everybody knows. So the air has been cleared. We're going to do this. If not this guy, then we're going to rank this guy. So everybody understands. Like, all right, at least I know I had my say. I was heard. Maybe I lost out on this one, but I won on that one. But with the Eagles, when you have people who are surprised by picks on the day that they're happening, people, in the organization who are part of the war room process, that's an issue. It means communication isn't good. It means those healthy conversations between everybody isn't taking place the right way.
Yeah, there was a part of the article that suggested that Roseman's not a good communicator to a group, but he's a very good one-on-one communicator, which sometimes causes problems. There's good and bad with that. If there were one-on-one and I could talk to you and really sit you down and level some things, fine. But if I'm in front of the group and the group at the end of it saying, this guy, what is he, out of his mind? Now you're having a full group of people against you as opposed to, I talked to him one-on-one and everything seemed to be okay. So I don't know. Obviously, they got the Lurie-Roseman connection is something that no fan here is going to accept. I can tell you that much, right? That's not going away, though.
No, it's not going away. It's been here for a while. It's going to probably be here a few more years at least. I think the only thing that would make it go away is if this whole process continued to downward spiral and things don't work out well. But at the end of the day, everybody says, well, they should fire Howie Roseman. But people are now starting to see more and more Jeffrey Lurie's impact. Do you think Jeffrey Lurie's going to hire like a Chris Ballard type, the guy who's the Colts GM, or a quote-unquote football guy? No, he's probably going to go with a different kind of Howie Roseman guy.
Right. Well, and the fact of the matter is he trusts Roseman, and he knows that Roseman isn't going to double-cross him, and he's going to do what he asked. And I say people blame Roseman, but Roseman's just essentially doing his job. Put it this way, he is not doing anything to challenge. You have people that, people run corporations or they run stuff, and it doesn't mean they're the best candidate. It means that's the person who won't fight corporate.
Yeah, and I don't know how I feel about that. I don't want to let Howie off the hook and say the man's got no choice. He's been here a long time. He does have influence over the owner, and if he really feels like the owner is making the kind of decisions that are not good long-term decisions for the organization, he needs to sit down with him somewhere and say, Jeffrey, you entrusted me with this power in this position. I got to tell you, here's where I think we're going wrong. And he's got to be able to look, he's made a lot of money now. I don't think Howie's worried about getting fired and what his life is going to be like after that. He shouldn't be at this point, but Howie's always kind of himself been a paranoid person and always kind of not just sticking up for Jeffrey, but making sure all the information goes through him first before it gets to Jeffrey. So
Yeah.
I really don't know about what goes on, in a closed door when those guys have conversations.
All right, that's where we'll end this conversation. It was a good one. It went by fast. Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And the new one dropped this morning at 6 a.m. So make sure if you want more draft information, you want some more draft coverage, get the latest from the Inside the Birds guys. They'll have a new Ask ITB. They'll have an Inside the Draft with Greg Cosell this week. Jason Avant, Quentin Michael on Q&A. So there's so much content going on from the Inside the Birds guys. And, of course, they're back tomorrow for Football at 4. Andrew DeCecco will answer your draft questions. We'll do another live chat with him on the Tuesday portion of Football at 4. All right, Moshe, good stuff, man.
All right, great time. Talk to you Wednesday.
All right, he'll be back on Wednesday. DeCecco tomorrow, Kaplan Friday.